Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this special DigiPride panel about the impact of LGBTQ comics we're calling Colouring Outside the Lines. DigiPride is presented by Healthy Sexual, Wizards of the Coast, and Xbox, and sponsored by Devolver Digital, AT&T, and Marvelous. I'm joined by four amazing LGBTQ comic book creators: Joe Glass, Matt Miner, Stephanie Williams, and Sina Grace. Welcome to you all.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
This is a panel discussion, so it's going to be a very sort of flowing, nice little questions. If you have at home any Q&A questions you want to put in the chat for these wonderful people, we'll be dealing with them at the end of the show. So rack them up as we go along, and we can get those questions asked at the end. Before we get started, I think it'd be good for all the panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll go around the screen as I'm looking at it. So Matt, who you are, where you're from, and sort of like the headlines of what we should know you for.
Sure. So my name is Matt Miner. I'm a comic book editor and writer. I'm the vice president of a nonprofit dog rescue here in Queens, New York City, called Zion's Mission Animal Rescue. Very recently, I'm a GLAAD Media Awards winner. I'm a Gayming Award winner. And I've been nominated for Ringos twice. And just recently, I won a Susie Award, which was the awards that Phillipsburg Comic-Con high school students put together. So very happy about that. I put together Young Men in Love with Joe Glass here, which was the book that won the GLAAD and the Gayming Awards. And people like Sina contributed to that. So it's really all of our awards. Yeah, I've had several comic series, mostly independent stuff, horror stuff, generally with some sort of social justice-y message embedded, whether it be animal rights or pro-queer stuff or, anti-Nazi stuff. Sometimes very blunt, sometimes a little more hidden. But yeah, I think that's what I'm known for, is the punk rock and the goth connection into comics.
Awesome, love that. Sina.
Hi, my name is Sina Grace. I live in Los Angeles, California. I write and draw comic books. I did a bunch of like memoir-y things at Image, and then I wrote an Iceman series at Marvel Comics, and lately I've been playing around in DC Comics. I'll be putting out a Superman book called The Harvests of Youth that I wrote and drew this October, and that's really crazy to write and draw a teenage Clark Kent. So I'm excited about that and super nervous as all get out. And yes, I also got to write and draw a story for the multiple award-winning Young Men in Love. And so that was that became a huge feather in my cap. So yeah.
Awesome. Stephanie.
My name is Stephanie Williams. I am a comic book writer. Most probably know me from my memes on Twitter, but when I'm not doing that, I am writing comics for DC and Marvel. What people might know me for would be Nubia and the Amazons. So bringing her back to the DC forefront. More recently with Marvel, I had fun writing The Family Snick. I was going to do some Infinity Comic stuff. And just June, I created a brand new character who will premiere in the Marvel Voices Pride book. But that's just some of what I'm doing. So I'm not on Twitter. I am writing.
And Joe, to finish us off.
So I'm Joe Glass. I'm based in deepest, darkest Wales, which is not proving that dark right now. I'm predominantly known for my LGBTQ superhero book, The Pride, which is currently collected as the Pride Omnibus in bookstores and comic shops everywhere, and is in fact a Gayming Mag Award winner. And the co-editor and one of the writers of Young Men in Love with Matt Miner here. which obviously won, as we say, the Gaming Mag Award and also the GLAD Award as well this year. And yeah, fingers crossed, maybe there's more in the future. Who knows? We'll keep our ears to the ground, and hopefully we've all been reading it, because it's a lovely bit of joy, I think, which and a really beautiful book with 20 wonderful stories in, and it was just an absolute pleasure to be part of making it.
I love all of that. Before we get started, I want to just say thank you again to our wonderful sponsors for DigiPride. We are going to look at a quick thing. So the AT&T Turn Up the Love Tour is back and bigger than ever. Check this out and I'll give you some more information.
Turn up the love, turn up the music. I wanna dance and you could take my hand and we could keep on moving. Turn up the love, turn up, turn up, turn up the love, turn up the love.
I love that lineup. You can find out more about the AT&T Turn Up the Love Tour, including how it is celebrating the LGBTQ community, supporting the Cherub Project, and where these free events are being held by visiting turnuplove.com. Now, let's get into our I think it'd be good to sort of start with maybe some contextual stuff. So I'm always fascinated how people end up in the positions they end up in, because I know, speaking from sort of personal experience, I didn't set out to do this in my life. So I'm going to pick on some random people, but I want to know what inspired each of you to become a comic book creator. I'm going to go backwards through the way we just go. So I'm going to start.
Hard to say. I mean, it sounds really basic. I just really liked comics. I decided like pretty early on in my teens, but I wanted to make comic books and just be a comic book creator. I initially thought I was going to be an artist, and then I discovered I am really bad at sequential art. But I had a natural gift for telling stories, so I just sort of focused on the writing, and from there just wrote all kinds of different things. Studied writing and writing creatively as well, and then eventually bit the bullet and started making comic books.
I love that. Stephanie, what was your journey into this space?
It was all over the place. So of course, grew up loving comics, but before this, my other life, I was a research scientist. So not super creative, but you find ways to make experiments go a little bit quicker, so maybe a little creative in that way. But it actually wasn't until I became a parent that I was like, let's go back to what our dreams were. Like, let's revisit those. So I don't know, something about that just made me kind of pivot. So I started freelance writing for different publications, like the main one, Sci-Fi Fangirls, and just talking about comics, deep dives, and really focusing on Black women superheroes. And next thing I knew, I was making comics myself, one pagers, because that's what I could afford from artists. So I was doing that. Got some fun stories from doing Lyft on the side to raise money so that I could pay for the art. And and now I'm here talking to you lovely people, because people are interested in stories that I have to tell, and I'm thankful that they are. So that is kind of a really bad version of how I'm here.
I love it. Sina, how about you?
I mean, well, for future reference, I want to hear all of those Lyft stories, because I feel like
Oh yes,
those conversations. But that is not for this chat.
That's a comics issue in itself.
yes.
Yeah, with that, we're gonna host a separate conversation for that. I loved comics as a little kid, back when they used to sell them at grocery stores, and I, in elementary school, just sort of set the goal for myself that I was going to make them. It's in my 5th grade yearbook. Like, we had our, favorite day of school, a favorite memory, and your dream career. And I said comic book illustrator. And I just followed the whims of a 9-year-old for 2 decades, and that included, you know, like for sort of like I wanted to know how the cookies were made at a very young age, and growing up in Los Angeles, we had comic book publishers here, so you know, it started out being an editorial intern at Top Cow, which you can really see the connective tissue in my art there. And then I apprenticed under a comic book artist, Howard Chaykin, and then when I went to school, I studied creative writing, and like, but I shifted and retooled like every prompt to sort of work towards my ambitions. And yeah, and then it's like it, you know, self-publishing, like, and I started off with like just really crummy zines that I was, you know, slicing and stapling myself, and going to little small press expos here on the West Coast, and just building and building and building on that, until I started doing some editorial work for Robert Kirkman at his Skybound imprint at Image Comics, and that sort of helped me really take like everything I'd learned and then push Gaily forward as a freelance writer and artist, and so since then I've just been kind of fumbling my way through it, hoping for the best, and having annual conversations with my mom about when to give up. she's like, I think it's time you get a job. I'm like, this is a job.
Matt, how about you, just to finish off?
Yeah, I mean, like everybody here, I had a lifelong love of comics, right? I grew up reading comics. I was pretty heavily bullied when I was young, and I found comics to be an escape from that. Comics and books and movies, you know, I just kind of lost myself in those worlds. I always wanted to be a writer, and that's what I went to school for. But it never occurred to me that I could write comics. I was trying to write prose, and everything I was writing was being rejected. And eventually I gave up, and I was like, oh, you know, screw this. But then sometime later, many years later, I was like, I'm reading comics. Somebody's writing these. Like, why am I not writing comics? And it drove me nuts, because back in the 90s, I lived in Portland, where Dark Horse is. And it's like, why didn't I get started on this sooner, right? So I went back to school for one class taught by Scott Snyder, and learned under him. I had a pitch and pages that I'd paid for by selling off a lot of my comic collection, already ready to go. So we workshopped that in his class, and after the class was over, I ended up landing that at Black Mass Studios, which was an upstart company that kind of focused more on political comics. And you know, from there it just continued on. I had a couple Black Mass series. I had one piece in a Vertigo anthology. I did books for the heavy metal band Gwar. That was a lot of fun working with them. You know, and then I started doing these anthologies, putting anthologies together, and you know, we did a couple that were focused on stories told in a brighter future during the Trump years, to kind of keep people's spirits up and you know, not be so negative. And then after that, I tapped Joe, because Joe was in the final one of those, and I tapped Joe, and I was like, why don't we do a queer romance anthology of all, you know, queer men? And, you know, everybody in the book is a queer man. So we put this together, and or a non-binary person with same-sex attraction. So we put this book together, and it's been the most rewarding thing I've done. It really is the book that I wanted as a child when I was trying to figure myself out, and everyone was calling me slurs, and I didn't know what I was, but I did know that I felt very alone and very afraid of everything. So if I'd had this kind of book and this kind of material, this positive representation of queer men, I think that would have been very helpful. So I hope it's helping kids now, or young people, or even older people. I mean, we created this book so that it would appeal to every age group. It's not YA, it's not a young reader's book, but it is appropriate for everybody. So very proud of it.
Awesome. That sort of segues actually quite nicely. So we've obviously, everyone's been talking about sort of the love of comics and how that kind of has been really, really formative for them. And then Matt, you obviously mentioned around the importance of telling those stories. What is it then, from an outsider's point of view looking in, what is it about comics that, comic books, that can tell compelling stories, but in ways that maybe other written media can't?
I think for one thing, comics are incredibly accessible. Sure, like we might say there's issues with the marketing and the marketplace of comics, and that, you know, perhaps limited venues to get them, etc. But I think the actual medium itself is incredibly accessible, because you can generally get into comic books no matter what level of reading you are. It means that, like, because I just think back, like when I was a younger and a kid and struggled with reading anything long form, comic books was something I could stick at, and it was because, like, the images, like, fascinated me and just kept my attention a lot better than just a plain prose book could. And I think that's incredibly useful to have, because it just makes it something which so many more people can enjoy in their own different ways.
I think I knew there was going to be a beautiful intellectual answer among one of us. So I was like, okay, well, what's the non-intellectual answer? And for me, it's like they're the first memes. They're the first screenshots. Like they're memes before memes, because it's a static image with words next to it, you know, and it's just pop art at its purest. And I think that sort of that will never change, and that will always have this intrinsic value to anyone, kind of, as Joe said, like at any reading level, at any intellect level. There's just a way to jump in and have your attention grabbed, and also the message delivered, you know, right then and there. Like the next step is scratch and sniff, and then otherwise we've really just captured like almost all of the senses and feels.
I see them as more interesting history books, because a lot of times you get a nice snapshot of whatever is going on in that year during that time. I just think of just the 70s, and a lot of the Black characters that I follow, a lot of them were inspired by Blaxploitation movies that were going on. So just kind of looking at that, think about the 90s, and if we're just talking about mainstream and just kind of getting political and talking about the effects of the Reagan era and some of the war on drugs. You get a lot of that, or you get to see fun things like fashion. I really miss the days of seeing superheroes outside of their suits more, and like them in just regular casual clothes. And also I feel like comics makes conversation sometimes a little bit easier. You know, the Avengers taking on affirmative action, that's a little bit easier of a conversation to have with someone than talking about real life effects and affirmative action. But it's a nice way to kind of open up that conversation if you've got, you know, Hawkeye upset because Sam Wilson has taken his place. So for me, like, comics are just a really great way to start conversations.
Yeah, I agree with that. Comics are a really awesome medium for speaking to the world around us, right? And I kind of feel if you're making art and it doesn't say something about the world around you, then why are you even making it, right? And so, you know, all my work has really had my heart in it, and I think it's just a really amazing medium for being able to tell your point of view and bring light to certain subjects, you know, while being fun and entertaining. So I totally agree with Stephanie there.
Thank you, Matt.
I love the idea that comics are more accessible, and maybe the way I sort of think of them is that with the imagery that goes alongside the text, you can kind of show a bit more than you have to tell. I think in long-term prose, obviously, it's all very descriptive and all very wordy. Whereas I think this can be a bit more nuanced in a way. Like there can be kind of like unwritten cues and stuff in some of the imagery that goes alongside it as well. So to Stephanie's point, it has the education side of it can be a little bit more delicate in some ways. It doesn't necessarily have to kind of like smack you over the head or kind of wax sort of chapter and verse. So I think the accessibility piece there you mentioned, I think the history point of it is really interesting as well. Moving on then to sort of the sort of next step of this sort of iteration of why are we doing this? Telling LGBTQ stories has been obviously really big across all the other mediums. I know we sort of touched on a few things, but what does everyone think about why it's so important to have LGBTQ stories exist and be sort of told through comics?
Well, I mean, if we're going back to just how accessible comics are, it is deeply important for, and especially younger readers, or honestly anyone of any age, to see themselves represented on the page, and not just in the character and the writer, editorial, all of that. Because I don't know, something about seeing someone. For me, it was seeing, I don't know, like Monica Rambeau. You know, she got turned down from her promotion and becoming captain, but still ends up becoming Captain Marvel in a more spectacular way. That meant something. That means something. And as far as just queer stories and having those exist, that's something that I wish that I would have had when I was younger, and I didn't have to rely on subtext. Subtext sometimes is important, and it has its place, but if I would have had access to more stories with just like, no, like these two women are together. These two men are together. This person is pansexual, bisexual, and they're exploring this. And to just kind of to see that, you know, name it, claim it, and it's a thing. I think of it that way. So those stories need to exist, whether they're tragic, whether they're happy, or whatever. The more we have of them, the wider range. And I don't think there's ever anything wrong with more in that sense.
Yeah, I think that the representation is so important. Like, you know, it goes back to what I said earlier. When I was young, I didn't have that. I lived in a very small town. It was a very racist and homophobic town where, you know, calling someone gay was like the worst thing you could call them. And yeah, and you know, having that representation, somebody reading a story where they see themselves on the page or they connect with the character because, you know, they have a lot of the same qualities, or you know, they're figuring out that they're bisexual or gay, or I just think it's so vitally important for people to have those kind of things.
Plus, it's for being able to see the different kinds of stories as well, and that sort of ties into what you're saying about having more and how more of it can only be a good thing. Because, like, certainly when I was sort of growing up, what few LGBTQ stories there were, particularly in superhero comics, which is like the genre I love most in the medium. There was so little of it about, and what little there was nearly always it's a coming out story, and 9 times out of 10 the coming out's really kind of bumpy ground sort of story, and I was starting to realize as a young gay man, and coming to terms of like both my sexuality as an individual, but also like the community that I was becoming a part of and our history, that there was like so much more to our stories than just we come out and that's it. Like there's so much more after that, and you never got to see that. So like a lot of my work then became about like, well, let's just tell the other stories, like what happens after you come out, like what kind of other issues sort of affect our community, and telling them in such a way that by having them out there means that not only are they there for the people who identify with that, but they're also there for the people who don't identify that, whether they be allies or know nothing about it. By it being out there, it actually sort of shows them this world which they hadn't considered, but is part of the world around them. And I think that's like why it's so important to have it, particularly in comics, where you know certain big publishers have always been about like showing the world outside the window, and it's just like, well, to do that you need to show all of it. You can't just show like a small section of what you prefer. You need to show it all, and sometimes that means warts and all and everything. So yeah, for me, like that's kind of the importance of it and why it should be included in comics, because like it's the accessibility, it's the fact that there's so much out there to be seen. Why should we limit ourselves to just one kind of thing, you know? The world is far more interesting than that, so why shouldn't our comics be equally interesting like that?
Yeah, and bouncing off of what Stephanie said regarding like they act as, you know, these history books in a way too. It's like for so long, as Joe was saying, it's like the only stories we were allowed to bring to the table were like the tragedies. And I know even working on Iceman, it was Marvel Comics wanted the coming out story, and I wanted the being out story. And by the time the book had gotten to its third volume and I was able to sort of just assert, you know, a little bit more control, it was suddenly about being out, focusing on what queer joy looks like, and also focusing on, as Joe said, like what are the other things we have to think about and worry about in our community. And recently I've been working on this like young adult graphic novel that is just like a pure action romp with a bunch of kids. And I hit a point in revisions where like I just needed, you know, I needed a refresher. I needed something to get my juices flowing creatively. And I was going through my bookshelf just trying to find similar pieces that could get my mind in the place of a bunch of queer kids like bashing some monster's brains in, you know, dressed turbo gay to the nines, like, you know, where like, you know, the pitch was like, where's our Big Trouble in Little China? And I don't have that on my bookshelf. And it's like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing this. And it's a, you know, it's a shame that I'm sure even if I look far and wide, I can find maybe 2 to 3 other examples of that in the market that, you know, are as good as I want my book to be.
I think that's...
Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that's something we did with Young Men in Love. We focused very much on queer joy. We didn't focus, we had a directive to keep the stories positive. We didn't want to see the typical, you know, the cheating stories that you see in a lot of the old comics, the breakups. We didn't want to see that. We wanted to focus on queer joy, stories told with, you know, queer people by queer people, and have them be uplifting and happy, you know, while still being super entertaining and fun.
Like we still contain drama, like we still contain, because I was, as much as I was like queer joy, we wanted to have this representation of issues which here's the thing, like I will say like affect the queer community and queer male community or whatever, but like these issues affect everyone. Like we discuss body dysmorphia in there and things like that. That is not an exclusively queer issue, and like these kind of things just like could do with telling, you know, because particularly in the context of sort of male body image, the way we sort of go through body dysmorphia might be slightly different to like how you know, female or non-binary people might go through it, or even now like all kinds of other issues which we brought up in there, like we were struggling relationships and things like that. But everything sort of ultimately comes to this whole story point of showing the brightness in the world. So yeah, that was a big part of what we were doing with Young Men in Love, is like letting there be a little bit of an element of warts and all, but without it being so focused on the tragedy, because we've had that for decades. And it's about time to, and with most of what I do as well, is just like, let's change it up a bit. Let's show something different.
Yeah, when I see a show and it's got, you know, they introduce the queer character, I'm like, oh, cool. And then suddenly it's, you know, their parents are freaking out, and it's like the tragedy, and it's like they're being kicked out of their home, and I'm like, I'm so sick of that story. I'm so tired of seeing queer people in media beaten up, basically, right? So I'm really happy with the book that we put together. Very, very happy. Like Joe said, there's a few warts, but none of it is, you know, tragic stuff.
I got one more. I'm so sorry. Also, yeah, no, the image book I'm doing, Rockstar and Softboy, is literally just like I wanted to put 2 gay characters in a room and promise the reader that they never end up together. And it's just about queer friendship, you know, and also no longer having to code queer friendship onto like Romy and Michelle and stuff like that, or like Buffy and Faith or whatever. It's like I just wanted to give gay men like 2 characters they could say without having to be like, yeah, we're Lucy and Ethel, we're Abby and Alana. It's like, no, you're Rockstar and Softboy. and you're happy for it. You're happier for it.
I think that happiness is really important, and I think it's been really interesting how you've all kind of picked up on the same sort of thing, which is that journey from the traditional either, oh look, they're coming out, or oh look, they're really suffering with being homosexual, into they're just absolutely rocking their lives and they're serving it. And I think what have you seen as been kind of like the major triggers for that journey? Like who's really kind of led the way in that? And I think as well that what's the timeline of that been? Like it's only recently been that kind of switch we've seen maybe in the last 5 or 10 years in broadcast media, for example.
The biggest sort of step forward, certainly in comics, has been the inclusion of queer creators in positions as writers, artists, and editors in books, particularly when we're talking about like big two titles. Like say, if we didn't have these queer creators actually being able to tell their stories and being able to come in from the angle of just like, we know what's been told about our community for so long, but like there's actually so much more to the story, then we wouldn't have gotten to where we are now. So it was the big thing for like how we've got to this stage now is inclusion, just actually including us in the ability to tell our own stories.
Imagine that.
I know, right? Kind of handy.
It's always disappointing when you pick up queer media and you find out that the creators are all straight and they're just guessing at what it's like. And it's like, well, that's why this was off. That's why that was off. A really good example of that is Call Me By Your Name. I don't think the director is queer, is he?
He's queer. I think he's bi.
Is he? Oh God, it felt so fake to me. It felt like a straight guy like guessing at what queer romance would look like, and I was not into it. So sorry.
No. I mean, I would say a big example for me, or like someone I look up to in comics, would be Mariko Tamaki. I just think that, you know, it's also like a taste level, and in the sense of sort of her working with her cousin to make this just truly stunning book that opened the door for her to then make even gayer and gayer stories. And then also to just being like the kind of writer who made sure she was getting opportunities where she wasn't just pegged as like, oh, let's give this person the gay character. And she pulled it off all the way to the point where she was writing Batman, you know, and had Dan Mora drawing her Batman, and it's one of the most iconic runs. So I always look to Mariko as like, how do I achieve this level of being normalized as a creator and being given opportunities that, you know, I was about to be so shady, and I'm not. Sorry, no, just like, you know, like any freaking you know, like balding white writer whose name is like Ed or Brian, or like, you know what I mean? It's like it's just they come out and they just get the opportunities, and most of them are great writers, but it's also like there are some balding writers in the queer community who could do a great job too.
I don't know if this was necessarily a beacon, but if anything, it just reaffirmed that, you know, it's fine to just be who you are as you're writing, and hopefully people respect that and they call you other than June, or in my case, other than February and June.
Yeah.
So it was most recently Batwoman, and I hate that I'm bringing up all like the big two stuff, but Batwoman, the show, did a really great job of just having the main character just be Black and queer. They even got a slow burn out of that, which I did not see coming. I was hoping, crossing my fingers, that it would happen, but it just did. But if anything, like, it was just, you know, the main character figuring out what it meant to be a hero, and you got that story, and then, you know, her queerness, her Blackness, all of that were just icing on the cake. It wasn't made the focal point. If anything, because she is who she is, the stories reflected that. So it just kind of existed. It was just the thing. And I hate to like say it like this, but sometimes it's nice to be like, oh, I hope that folks who are allies or whoever, they're like, oh, they're just like us. Like, absolutely. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
But duh. Like, they argue just like us, absolutely. So anyway, Batwoman was like the more recent thing where I was like, yeah, this is how you do it. You tell these stories with your characters, and I don't know, like if someone's wanting you to do something that is more stereotypical because that is what they're comfortable with, and it seems like folks seem to be a little bit more comfortable with the trauma and seeing queer characters go through that, because that's the only way that they can empathize. That's pathetic. No, I want to move past that.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We've all sort of like been mentioning the big two. What's been the impact of the more mainstream publishers now sort of telling LGBTQ stories or giving space for LGBTQ stories?
So just real quick, so or I'll hop in first, because with Nubia and the Amazons, it was the introduction of Bia, who was a Black trans woman. That was something that just felt natural, and like it was just a duh thing. Of course, a Black trans woman would be on Themyscira. We're talking about an island where women who have fallen to violence in man's world are reborn again. So why wouldn't that be a thing? And I'm happy that no pushback or anything from editorial. Just like, oh, okay. And I'm like, great, because I had a whole PowerPoint presentation ready for you as to why this needed to happen. But I'm happy that it did. And then everything else that I was able to do with Nubia and other stories that I've done, like I mean, if you call me up, I hope that you know that you're getting what you're going to get, which is me telling these stories with these characters in the way that I would like to see them. Nubia is sharing a story with her girlfriend Io about the truth of like, this is actually how I broke my sword. I was wrestling. It's not I was fighting some beast. I mean, that's the story that I wanted to tell. So because I feel like an editorial, because there is more representation, more queer folks in editorial, maybe that's another reason why there isn't so much pushback. But I don't know, maybe they recognize that for their bottom dollar, because that's what matters at the end of the day, because capitalism, that it does pay to be diverse. It does pay to allow folks to tell these stories that reflect all of our customers and not just some of them.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, not just the straight white ones.
Yeah. Because
in terms of the question of like what's the impact of like Marvel and DC finally getting on board the Pride train, it's been great. I think like it's fabulous to see it. I've been really enjoying seeing it out there, because like I said, I'm a massive comic book fan, massive superhero comic book fan in particular. So obviously Marvel and DC have very much always been the big ones for me. Like I absolutely adore a lot of what they put out, but like felt like a little underserved as a queer reader for so long, which is what prompted me to start making the books I started making. So when Marvel and DC, was it now 2-3 years ago, decided to start doing Pride specials, and then also, particularly with DC, like pushing those LGBTQ inclusive stories throughout the line all year round, that was just really wonderful to see. My only real detraction, I'd say, from it is actually aimed more at the queer mainstream press than it is at like Marvel DC in any ways, because like say Marvel DC great been doing these for the last couple of years, but like there have been independent creators creating these exact kind of stories for absolute years, and like the big sort of mainstream queer press has paid them absolutely no attention. So like these are actual, quite often queer creators as well, actually telling these stories. But as soon as Superman's doing a queer story, then they were on it. Like they were down on it. And you know what? That is capitalism again. I absolutely understand it. I personally would just love to see mainstream queer press giving other queer books, like upcoming one like The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos, like giving that as much attention as they do like Wonder Woman, Superman, and Iceman. You know, like let's bring that attention all around to the queer creators out there who are doing the hard work, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I guess the hope is also too, it's like getting queer creators to even that level of where the Image founders were, where it's like you can build them up. And I think that that's part of the impact, is getting these folks built up to the place where then they can go and they are the name brand that then is able to build IP from the ground up. And you're seeing that with someone like James Tynion, who just massively blew up at DC Comics, and now he's really focusing on creator-owned work that is getting just less and less queer-coded and more queer. And he can do that because he's a household name. And in terms of impact, I mean, I think it's like I don't have a tangible answer for myself, but all I can say is like it's the thing that Joe was saying, is that these characters get so much more attention, and it finds people a lot easier. And I just, like, I've been in comics a long time, as you heard from me wanting to do this since I was in high school, and like 17 issues of Iceman just got so much more love and support, and the most heartfelt handwritten fan letters brought to me at conventions than any other experience. Or I put a drag queen character in there, and I did that just for me, and that's the only thing in that book that got written up by Entertainment Weekly. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, there's my character in Entertainment Weekly. What? Like, in print? Cool. Marvel didn't care. That's fine. But and I guess that's the impact when you're doing things for you and you have that platform. That joy shows up, or that level of love and care shows up, and people respond to it in a really meaningful way. And your hope is that you can affect someone, and then the dream is that you can save someone.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I love that.
And if Marvel ever finally do decide to bring me into one of these Marvel Pride books, they will care about Darkvale, I'm telling you. I'm going to make that happen if it's the last thing I do.
That is for you to do.
We just won a GLAAD award. Why aren't we being approached by Marvel or DC for these books?
And the Gayming award.
The Gaming award. I mean,
yeah.
And
Okay.
That is another podcast, or not another podcast. That's another panel
Session. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a whole therapy session right there.
Yes.
Just a reminder to everyone in chat, where there's going to be a Q&A at the end. So do start dropping any questions you have for these wonderful people and talking about comics into the chat if you want to ask any questions. I'm going to ask my next question. What stories do we need to see more of in comic books?
I personally, if we're talking specifically like queer stories in comic books, and particularly in mainstream comic books, I would love to see more queer person of color stories, particularly around male characters, purely because quite often it just feels like the overabundance of male queer characters, whether they be bi or gay, are primarily white males. I would love to start seeing that more explored with like a black male character who's gay and stuff like that, because we need to see that diversity in our representation. Because like I say, otherwise you're never going to see everyone. Not everyone's going to feel seen. At the end of the day, as much as you want to feel excited about the inclusion of a gay superhero or anything, like a gay white male superhero is only going to speak for so many people, and it's not even going to be all white gay males out there, because like everyone's experience is different. So that's why you need this sort of many examples and as diverse an example base as possible.
More of what Joe just said, and then also showing queer kids getting love and support from their parents. I mean, I know like the way we see it, it makes it seem like that just is a non-factor, but that is not completely true. So to see more of that, I mean, I don't know how much you can get of it in Capes comics, because usually he's only one parent alive or none alive, but but to see more of that, and also just more queer friendships. I want to see that and that dynamic explored, and again, just more mundane stuff, whatever that is. I don't care if they're just going shopping. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Like I in terms of like queer friendships, I'd actually love to see a lot of queer straight friendships as well.
Yeah,
that always feels like a dynamic which is very lacking and is very rarely done. Particularly like a straight and gay character, or straight and lesbian character who are just good friends. Like Marvel had a really great example at one point in Rockslide and Annalie, and they played with that for like a very short amount of time, and then it just disappeared, and obviously can't really be a thing now in current continuity, which is a shame because you don't often see that. We actually just had a really great show here in the UK called, oh my god, what was it called? I think it was called like Big Boys, and it was about this sort of like coming of age story. These guys, well, actually a bunch of characters who are starting university, and the core relationship is this gay guy who's just coming out and his roommate who's straight, and they become like best friends. And like that was wonderful to see because that kind of relationship is so rarely seen. And I think right now, where the world around us is becoming very dark for the LGBTQ community, it would be nice to show the queer community and straight communities can be friends. We can relate to each other. And that's not an integrationist sense. That's not a kind of anything like that. Or it's purely a case of, guess what? We are different, but we are also more the same than we are different. So like, why not just understand each other?
The friendship thing's really interesting because sometimes there's sometimes that unwritten sort of thing about, oh, someone's going to turn someone, or there's going to have to be some unrequited nonsense at some point, or just anything like that kind of like muddies the water, and there's that kind of almost undercurrent of there has to be a reason why they're friends or something, and it's just like, no, let's just normalize friendships.
Yeah. Exactly. People can just be friends.
Yeah.
My favorite comics are the ones that kind of explore humanity and our relationship to, the other people and the rest of the world. And yeah, I mean, that plays in. I love seeing that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I like to create, and more queer friendships, more queer and straight friendships, without, any weird, unrequited situations, like you said. I mean, that's all great.
Sina, what stories do we need to see more of in comic books?
I mean, from what I heard, I think I just completely agree. I'm trying, and it's just more of the nuance. And I think also just more from the voices belonging to the characters, like the creators. That's really it. I'm seeing, and here's the other thing, I'm seeing a lot of it in the YA market. There's a lot of this kind of material in the YA market. So I just think seeing more of it in genres we're not used to, like crime and noir, and then in ways that are handled like meaningfully, because I think in those genres you can really fall into some tropes, and you can have people defending themselves or people with blind spots. And so I think it would be really cool to see that more in like genres we're not used to.
And I think I want to add as well, like, as much as we've been saying about like friendships and showing queer friendships is important, let's have some more queer 40 stories as well, because there is so much straight first stories out there. Like, come on, let's let the queers have a bit of that enjoyment too, so let's do like the swimsuit specials and the galleries. Like, let's do that, because guess what, like, so much I think of the queer experiences being villainized, and queer community getting villainized, is this idea of like sexualizing everything, like, and making like that sexuality the villain of the piece, and like a negative and something to be loathed. And it's just like, which ties into a wider puritanism, which is like pervades everything. But it's just like, that is not something to be ashamed of, and that is something that the more is educated and the more is shared is going to be safer and better for everyone. So like, yeah, like if the straights can have their cheesecake covers, let's have a few more 40 covers for the queers too. Why not?
Sponsored by Prep.
Amen.
Exactly. Shout out to our sponsor, Healthy Sexual. Go and check it. Go and get your Prep now. We I think, just to build on that last point, I think as someone who's quite proudly in the bear community as well, like, I want to see different body types as well. I want it thotty, but I also want thotty body types. So I think sometimes the body type thing is starting to come in, and we're starting to see that trend. But it still tends to be the more muscular ones that kind of get those kind of hot moments. Whereas kind of, I want to see a belly. I want to see like a beard. I want to see some hips. I want to see that sort of thing, and sort of rocking out and being proud as well.
I did that in the first DC Pride special. I introduced a little character named Drummer Boy, and I was like, those shorts need to be all the way up. Like those legs need to be out.
Yeah.
And I heard that the character might be showing up in something this year, so I'm really excited that because you put them out there, right? And then the hope is that someone else takes the opportunity and runs with it. So I'll know for sure. I'm like, this is a note to self to follow up on that and be like, is Drummer Boy in that story?
Yes. Yeah. We had a couple of questions coming, which is exciting. So our first question is, outside of your own works, what are some recent queer indie comics that you would recommend?
I've mentioned it once already, but The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos is fabulous. I believe Final Order Cutoff is coming up on it. So if you haven't ordered it from your comic shop, get there now. Go, don't walk, run. It's a fantastic book. I've had the distinct pleasure of reading a few issues ahead. It's absolutely amazing. So I definitely highly recommend that one.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, because I was like, wait, forget. Wash Day Diaries by Robin and Jamila. It's I mean, you want to talk about just queer folks doing mundane things. It's hair, it's dates gone wrong, it's all these things. It's also recently been nominated for an Eisner, so check that out. Wash Day Diaries.
I have it right here.
Yes.
Pool Boys. Oh no, I have that on my bookshelf over there. But this is I was thinking I have mine right here. Sorry, I have Pool Boys by Josh Trujillo and Josh Cornillon. I think they just put it in Diamond. It was like a huge Kickstarter success story, and it is literally about like a pool attendant that works at like an interdimensional spa. And it's very cheesecakey and thoughty. And then you saw me looking. I was trying to like every time this happens, I forget the names of things. So the only book on my bookshelf that I could see across the way that I'm like, oh yeah, that book, Bloom. I love that book. I think it's first, second. The Pride, Joe Glass. Young Men in Love is indie. Everyone should just pick that up too.
Yeah, absolutely. A few years ago, there was a book put out by Image Comics called The Pervert by Michelle Perez and Remy Boydell. And that is a fantastic book. I picked it up on someone else's recommendation, and as soon as I opened it, I could not put it down. It was fantastic. It's a pull no punches kind of in your face story about queerness and being trans, and it's fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful.
Two more which are available in trade now, which I'd highly recommend, would be Sins of a Black Flamingo, which is queer friendship, queer thoughtiness, is absolutely gorgeous and hot, and it's like crime noir supernatural, so like really fab. And Barbalian, Barbalian Red Planet, that's what it's called, which is just an incredible period piece set at the height of the HIV pandemic. So like that is really fantastic storytelling and really moving and powerful. So I'd recommend those ones too.
Let me throw another one out there by Dave Ebersol, who was in Young Men in Love. He actually has a book, and it's in trade now, called Dash. And like Sina was talking about, putting queer characters in different kind of genres, this is a noir detective story, and you know that the main character is queer, and it doesn't focus entirely on that. It's, you know, an actual detective story. And it's great. And Dave's a really good writer, and I think he's underrated. So that's one I would really want people to check out. Called Dash.
Awesome. Our next question is, what's the dream project or story you would want to make?
Okay. I just recognized the person asked some questions. So. I guess for me, I mean, I'm as has probably come across from earlier as well, I'm still definitely awaiting my invite into like Marvel Voices Pride or DC Pride. I would love to do one of those stories. But I would also, I'd say like dream projects, X-Men. Anyone who knows me even a little bit probably knows I am absolutely obsessed with X-Men. So I would love to be sunning myself on Krakoa anytime right now.
I agree with Joe on this 100%. Like I would love to be in one of the DC or Marvel Pride books, and X-Men is where my focus is too, but not the not Cyclops and Wolverine and those guys. I want to do the weird X-Men, the ones that aren't accepted by other people, the mutants who like Marrow and Chamber and the weird ones. Yeah, the best ones, the ones that don't get enough attention and are very, very freaking cool and have a lot of stories to tell. Would love to dive into that 100%.
Alien, let me write some damn xenomorphs. I want to be in space. I'm not gonna give the pitch away, but like, let me some xenomorphs. I mean, we could set it in Earth, or some planet off somewhere, and it could be like I don't know, similar to like underwater, and they like got a whole facility down there, and xenomorphs can they can plant their little xenomorph babies in anything. Can you imagine a xenomorph well? Because I can, and that's what I want to write.
Oh, and here I was thinking comics aren't scary. I think in terms of LGBTQIA plus stories, I know I put something down on the table when I was like, oh, drag superhero, and I never really picked that back up again, and that's always in the back of my mind. And I'm realizing, like, why not now? Why not soon? And then in terms of like other people's toys that I want to play with, it's just always been like, just always want to do something with Catwoman. And the other thing I've told everyone at DC is I'm like, I don't want like 8 pages. Like, come on, like give me that Teeny Howard run. Like give me a wide berth with Selena Kyle.
Nice.
Love that.
I'm gonna read that, Sina.
Let's manifest it. If you know Jessica Chen, please help me out.
There's actually an interesting crossover there between your drag pitch and the Catwoman pitch, because Catwoman's basically drag.
She has a lot of drag friends, that. We all know that.
Exactly. Catwoman and the Pussy or something. I don't know. Just making that up. I can't say the second thing I was going to say. I was about to say something really stupid, but I realised we're on the front page, so I can't use that drag analogy. So we'll move on. My question is, what is coming up for you all in the future, and how can we all follow you on the socials? I'm going to mix it all up, so I'm going to go to Stephanie first.
You can follow me on Twitter, where I'm not technically anymore because it's a terrible place, TikTok or Instagram at Steph_I_Will. If you love X-Men dubs, I'm doing them for you. As far as upcoming projects, I got to play in the world of Magic the Gathering, which I absolutely love now, and I want to be a part of D&D groups and all of that. So if you have any, reach out to me. But it's a story that features Jason Vraska. It's a swashbuckling romance, as I've been calling it. And again, I have a new character who is queer. She's a STEM girl. All of these things. She premieres in Marvel Voices Pride, which is out June 15th. Both of those books are.
Awesome. Sina.
October. It's Superman, The Harvest of Youth. Writing and drawing 180 pages of Teenage Clark Kent. It's a special book, so everyone should pre-order that. And then I just put out my second Rockstar and Softboy book, where they go to space, and both are readily available wherever books are. And it's the best thing I've ever done. And Lady Gaga shows up in the space one. They go to Chromatica. I don't know. I legally got away with that. I did it. And the nice thing about this name, that is my real name, is you can kind of I have my flag firmly planted in all the social medias as @Sina Grace. So please give me a follow, and I'll be there.
Brilliant. Matt.
So right now I'm working on putting together another romance anthology. This one will be more diverse. It's not going to be all queer men. It's going to be queer stories everywhere. Plus, we're allowing some straight stories. But that's in the beginning stages, and everyone on this panel I will be approaching. So once it takes off. Otherwise, Joe and I are trying to make a Young Men in Love 2 happen, and hoping to, I mean, let's manifest that and the X-Men thing, Joe. Come on.
Let's make that happen.
Yeah, let's make these things happen. It's about time. I think we've been in comics long enough to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the things I'm working on right now. I've really been more focused on my dog rescue work rather than the comic work. It's just been a really busy time with the rescues, so I've been, doing comics a little less and dogs a little more. So
always good to have important work. Joe, with that slight slip of the tongue, I'll let you finish us off.
Oh, it got worse. So the next things for me. So June 1st and running all through Pride Month. I'll be kickstartering a new book, and it'll be the return of Pride to comics and Kickstarter in the Pride Summer Special, which is kind of like my, as well as getting to do the Pride again, my love letter to like classic things like the swimsuit specials of the 90s. Then there's another project of mine, which is a book of mine, which is being adapted into a new format, which I can't discuss too much about because it gets announced in the next like couple months. And I don't want to tread on any exclusives. So yeah, there is something else being announced soon. And obviously the Pride will be coming back into like a full series at some point next year. So those are all coming. In terms of where to find me online, I am joeglasscomics.co.uk for my website. You can find me on Twitter at Joseph Glass, on Instagram at Joe Glass, and on TikTok at Joe Glass Comics.
And I forgot to give my social stuff.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry.
Yeah, I totally screwed up. Okay, so like Stephanie, I'm not really on Twitter anymore. Once he took over, and it got even more awful. So I'm on Instagram at mattminer1984, and my website, which is rarely updated, at mattminerxvx.com. I'm also on Facebook if you just search Matt Miner Comics.
Brilliant. We are over time, actually. So this has been absolutely fantastic. What an amazing panel. I'm so happy we've been able to get this sorted and get this done. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah,
thank you for having us.
Absolute
Thank
pleasure.
you.
So Stephanie, Sina, Joe, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all at home for watching. A big thank you, as always, to our DigiPride partners, Healthy Sexual, Wizards of the Coast, Xbox, and sponsors Devolver Digital, I will get their name right, Devolver Digital, AT&T, and Marvelous. You can keep up. We are in the middle of DigiPride. We are just in the first month. There are 2 months left of our Pride. That goes all the way through to the end of July. So you can keep up with everything that's DigiPride related by heading to gaymingmag.com/DigiPride. And also go follow us on TikTok at Gaming Mag. We are trying to build that up. There's some very exciting things coming. I'm even going to put a banner on screen just to say go and follow us on TikTok. So please go and follow us on TikTok. There is some really, really fun stuff that's starting to happen, including discussion about whether gaming characters need to be in leather or not. It's really cutting edge TikTok journalism. So thank you once again, and we will see you all on Sunday for the DigiPride Derby that is taking place right here, 8 o'clock UK, 3 p.m. Eastern. So with that, I will say goodbye. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Press the wrong button. Now we're going to do the ending. There we go.